Hello, everyone. Welcome. This is SharePoint Power Hour. This is a weekly show that my coworkers at Rackspace and I do every Wednesday at 11 Central, and it's all recorded on our YouTube channel here at SharePoint RAX. Thanks for joining us. We have today we're going to have Mike Ross, one of our coworkers at Rackspace, is going to talk to us about his misadventures in SharePoint, which I think is going to be pretty entertaining. I'm very excited about it. Kind of what we do on the show is the topics are going to be all about, usually you're not going to get into anything nitty-gritty with writing code or doing anything in PowerShell or doing hardcore server admin stuff. It's usually kind of all the other topics that fall outside of that, and a lot of that applies to both SharePoint and Office 365. Oops, someone's got, oh, my YouTube started playing of myself behind the scenes. So we're going to go ahead and just introduce yourselves. Again, I'm Laura Rogers, and I've been using SharePoint about 10 years, and I'll start with, we'll go Tavis, Steve, Joelle, Ryan, and then we'll end with Mike, and then we can go into his presentation.
Hello everyone, my name is Tavis Lovell, and I am on the SharePoint Business Solutions team and deal with things relating to business intelligence, so things like Performance Point, Power Pivot, reporting services, all types of things like that.
Hello everyone, I'm Stephen Wilson. I am on the Business Solutions team. I do infrastructure, installations, troubleshooting, all that kind of stuff, and then sometimes I do some of the lighter end of business user kind of stuff, helping with setting up the initial taxonomy and lists, libraries, things like that. And I'm hoping to present some things in the future about using search, because I think all of you are tragically underutilizing search. So if you have any ideas about that, let us know in the comments or in the questions, whatever.
Or any ideas or questions the entire time, by the way. And if you're watching on YouTube, it's got a button that will take you, it says click to join the live Q&A on Google Hangouts, and it will take you over to the Google Hangout where there's a Q&A panel and everything. I forgot to mention that. Okay.
All right. Hey guys, I'm Joelle Farley. I am also on the Business Solutions team. I currently specialize in what we consider planning and design, so I typically work with companies when either they're brand new to SharePoint or they're getting ready to go to a new version of SharePoint or use SharePoint for something new. I typically go in and interview them and get to talk to them about what they're looking to do with it, and as well as building out their information architecture, taxonomy, governance, and all that fun stuff. So that's kind of what I've been doing lately, and that's, if I do presentations, it'll probably typically be around something like that. But I'm also looking forward to hearing Mike's presentation, because I'm sure it's going to be awesome.
All right, I guess that means I'm up. I am Ryan Keller. I am also part of the Business Solutions team. My specialty is branding SharePoint, so basically taking what you get out of the box and making it look not at all like that. I've been working with it for, let's see, about 7 or 8 years now, SharePoint that is, and have been specialized in branding for about the last 3 years or so. One of these days I'm actually going to sit down and figure out how long I've actually been using SharePoint, so I don't have to guess every time I get on one of these. But that's what I do, and hopefully in the future I will be putting together some branding presentations so we can all learn branding together. So that's me. Mike, you're up.
Thanks, guys. My name is Mike Ross. I am a dedicated SharePoint engineer here at Rackspace. I've been at Rackspace for 2 years. I've been working with SharePoint for about 7 years. I started with SPS 2003, and I'm going to share some of my misadventures in SharePoint, things that I've done over the years that have really, really caused some challenges in my SharePoint life. So please have pity on me, because I did recover from all these things, but I don't want anybody else to go through what I went through. So let me start my presentation, okay? All right, let's see. Can you guys see my presentation? Yeah?
Yep.
Yep.
Okay. So here's one thing I call, we don't need no stinking governance. When I first started doing SharePoint, I just threw everything together. I didn't care about who did what or who had what rights. And we deployed a brand new farm out in the UK, and it was great because a lot of international users were using it. And the day before we went live, the morning that we went live, the CIO of the company comes up to me and says, I can't log into the SharePoint. None of the partners can log into the SharePoint, and why? And I was devastated because just the night before we had tested all of this and it all worked. So what ended up happening was we had a developer who decided to go through and take everybody out of SharePoint all by herself. So I couldn't get back in with my normal account. I had to use our admin account to get back in and put everybody back into SharePoint. But then that made me think that maybe we should not have given that particular developer that amount of rights. Now, the funny thing is she left herself in there, so we knew exactly who did it. But that was not a good day. When we went to present this to the European customers, they were not happy because they said, hey, we're going to log into this, and nobody could log in. Then they called the CIO of the company, a major communications company, and he came right to my desk. So yes, you do need some sort of governance of who has rights to what and who can do things. This person was actually let go from the company because they were just a very difficult person. But when we asked her why she did it, she had no reason why. She just felt like she should take everybody out of all the groups in SharePoint. And so my lessons learned from that is that you got to make sure that you have governance and stricter permissions. Make sure only the people only have permissions for what their job or their role is. That's all that they need. Okay. So I call this one get an eye patch, because as everybody knows, patching SharePoint, sometimes it will poke you in the eye. This is something that I did by accident, and it wasn't my fault, but yes, it was. So I was running a STS ADM upgrade, and I'm trying to upgrade the URL, and everybody knows that's pretty simple to do. I ran it the first time, and it failed on me. I said, well, SharePoint, you're not as smart as I am, so I'm going to run it where they force the upgrade, and SharePoint said, sure, okay, I'll do it, and it did the upgrade. I browsed the site, it came up, and this was about midnight. I went to sleep. Driving into work the next morning, I get a phone call, and they're like, why is our SharePoint down? What did you do? I said, your SharePoint's not down. Yes, it is. Get in here right now. So I go into the office, everybody's huddled around the desk, and sure enough, the entire site was down. So basically what I had done was my friend, one of my coworkers, had moved the patches around, and we had them in a stored location. So I upgraded SharePoint with some older patches because he had moved the file structure around, which completely wiped out the content database. It was nothing but white space. So we ended up doing a restore. Yeah, I had, yeah, everybody's laughing. Yeah, I had egg on my face. Also, I learned that you have to double check the patches and results. I did not know that SharePoint would keep sites cached for like, what, 10 to 15 minutes? So even after I'd done the upgrade and it said it was successful, for about 10 minutes you can browse the site, it will come up. I should have waited a little longer. I should have double checked it. Also, I should have made sure the patches that I was applying were the correct ones. Again, they were the day before until my buddy decided to reorganize all the patch structure. And I had to get an eye patch because I put my eye out that day. Let's see here. This is a good one. Active Directory destruction. My third week here at Rackspace, I made a huge, huge mistake. Now, of course, you know SharePoint has a lot of service accounts. And if you there's a domain, and you'll see I made up 2 different sets of service accounts. Now, what I was doing was, my first task was to build a farm for a customer, no problem. When I finished building the farm, I said, oh, look at these old service accounts, I will delete them, which I did. I didn't realize that the other service accounts were for another farm. They were just reusing Active Directory. So I deleted all the service accounts for an entire farm. Hour later, the whole thing went down. We are lucky that we had Active Directory recovery turned on, and we could recover all the service accounts. So, again, lessons learned. Every time we have a customer that wants to reuse their Active Directory, they don't want another domain controller, we actually create new service accounts, and it's a policy. Rather than delete the service accounts, I should have disabled them. And then I'm lucky we had the AD recycle bin turned on, because you can't just create new service accounts because the GUIDs would be different. So that was about, again, my second or third week here at Rackspace that I pulled that one. Silly service accounts. Now, when I first started doing SharePoint, the environments were running. And there's usually a debate on how many service accounts a person should have per SharePoint farm. We used one. And the reason we used one service account is because we had always used one service account. When I inherited my old farms, they ran under one SP admin account for all the web applications, all the services, so on and so on and so forth. And guess what happened? Somebody deleted the account, and everything went down. I wasn't really at fault at this because it's something that I inherited. But as I got to know SharePoint more and more, I should have changed the number of service accounts. I should have taken the time to make the corrected number of service accounts for SharePoint. Follow the Microsoft recommended guidelines. And I believe in 2007, you should have about 7 service accounts. 2010, about 9 service accounts. Many people don't do this. And I know a lot of companies that still only have 1 service account for every service. You need to change that. Now, this is one that, missing central admin. This is one that was so funny, it took me 2 hours to solve. I was using remote desktop tabs to set up all my different SharePoint, the members in the SharePoint farm. So I would provision central administration, and then I would switch over to another box, and I would try to provision it. I tried to make sure it was unprovisioned on one box. Well, for some reason, central administration kept missing. It was gone. I would go back to the box and say, well, what happened to it? Well, what had happened was, in one of my remote desktop tabs, I had the host name, and on the other one, I had the IP address. So what I was doing is I was actually taking central administration off the CA box and thought I was putting it on another box, but I wasn't. So I couldn't figure out why central administration was missing. So finally, when I looked at my remote desktop tab, I said, okay, maybe I should put the actual host name of every single box so I know where it's supposed to be. Yes, Ryan, I see you laughing. Yes, I did that. It took me 2 hours to figure out that I just mislabeled my, my remote desktop tabs. So uniform remote desktop tab settings with the host names, so you'll know where central administration is supposed to be. This is one was a carryover from something I learned, and I call it my IIS idiot edits. So basically what we used to do is for every site we had an IP address per site per box. So if you had 4 web front ends, 32 web apps, 128 IP addresses total configured, that's several VIPs, that's several VIPs, that's several IP addresses. Instead of using the host headers, what we used to do is we would make an IP address per web app. Now, the first 2 or 3 you do, it's not so bad. But when you get to 32 web apps, you have 128 IPs you're using. And when you look at the configuration for that, or you look in your load balancer, it's a mess. Again, this is something I had inherited because it had always been there. I just carried it on and took it to one farm had 128 IPs on the web front ends. Complete mess. I should have just used the host headers, and that would have been just fine. I just didn't know any better. Also, another one, web config edits. We had developers that would just edit web configs and hand them to us, and it wouldn't work. Now we stay away from web config edits unless it's something that you have to do, and you must have a backup of your web configs. So use your host headers, and if you can do it in SharePoint, do it. Do not edit your web configs. Free web apps. Everybody gets a free web app. Free web apps for everybody. Did I lose people? No, everybody's there? Okay. So I had a new VP show up, and he wanted SharePoint. He bought his own licenses. Everything's ready to go. No problem. And he said, would you create me a web application on my dev box? Sure, no problem. So I created him a web application. And that was the web application. Okay, no problem. It says dev. It's the host name. No problem. 4 weeks later, I found out he's using that as the production URL. And he's sending it to everybody in the company. And I had to go back and tell him, you can't shouldn't do that. Well, he said he was going to do it anyway, and he was the VP, and that's fine. So what I used to do is if I had a dev box and anybody wanted a web application, I would just say, yeah, sure, I'll make you one. Go ahead and help yourself. But many people started using them as production and sending those URLs out. And of course, they didn't look very nice. So you should have a strict policy on what is dev and what is production and what can be shared out for people. It was actually very embarrassing when people would look at those URLs, and that would be the URL they would use.
Mike, is that a matter of just verbally telling them, or is there something specific you did on the web app to make sure they couldn't do that?
It was a matter of verbally telling them that anybody who wanted one, after this had happened, I told them that this is used for dev only. You cannot use this for production. I will be monitoring to see if you're going to be putting production data there. And I got buy-in from the higher-ups to go ahead and shut it down if they started sending it out as production.
Okay, good idea.
So one day the boss came in and said, hey, migrate this site now. And that's what he said. And
no, we never see that. Never says that.
So I'm sitting there and I said, yes, sir. So I took the content database and migrated it and moved everything over. And the next day, nothing worked. And ended up that the migration had failed, that the people who were supposed to put in the DNS switch didn't put the DNS switch in. And of course, the accounting team was very upset that all their accounting information was gone. Well, it wasn't gone. It just wasn't available to them. But just like a good worker, when my boss said migrate now, I migrated it.
Was it a matter of migrating it to like a new version or something, or?
It was migrating to a new version, yes.
We get a lot of that, guys, don't we? We get clients saying, I just want to keep SharePoint 2007. I really don't care about any of the new version stuff. I need it on a new server because I need, to update the hardware, but just don't worry about any of the upgrading. And we have a lot of these conversations, don't we, guys, to where you have to kind of explain to them, well, okay, well, you can stay on 2007 or whatever it is, but you got to think about the browser issues and incompatibility and like kind of what the users are going to experience with all the errors you get with IE11 and all the different stuff. And do you see that happen too, where customers will come say, just don't worry about updating me to the next version, I just want to keep it? And
I had that conversation with a customer. They had 3 different farms, and they wanted them all migrated to a single 2013 server, and there was one existing 2013 server, a 2010 farm, and a 2003 farm that they swore had already been migrated to 2007, but everything was 2003. Like central administration was 2003, all the version numbers were 2003, and they're like, no, we paid a company, they upgraded it. And it's like, all right, well,
okay.
So they were telling me about all the upgrades and stuff, and then they were like, the only thing is, and they brought up the first page of the 2003 farm, they were like, we can't change this page. We need it to be just like this. And it's like, so you want to upgrade it through 3 versions of SharePoint.
10 years.
10 years, but you want it to be exactly the same.
You know what? We could just get Ryan to do his branding magic and make SharePoint 2013 look just like 2003, right?
He can do that.
That's blasphemous.
I was going to say, he might be able to do it, but he might cut off his own hands before he...
Okay, Mike, sorry about that.
Oh, no problem. No problem. So my main lesson learned for this, even though the boss says do it now, sometimes you have to push back on non-documented migrations. And honestly, it was 4:45. He walked by my desk and said, do this now. And he walked away. And as a good SharePoint admin, I should have went to his office and said, okay, we just can't do this now. We have to look at this before we do it and make sure we can test this. So I did not push back. I just did what he told me, and it was completely wrong. Here's another pain point I went to, which is installing Project Server, which I hate to let people know, but I have installed and run Project Server in SharePoint. It is very, very easy to install, very difficult to configure. So what we ended up doing with Project Server is we had a lot of people that were customizing Project Server, making custom timesheets, so on and so on and so forth. And Project Server has a timesheet queue that when you enter your time, it goes into the database. Now, The funny thing about this was they had customized it so much that it was taking 7 minutes for you to save your time. You put in your 8 hours, you click save, and it would spin for 7 minutes. We thought it was a problem with Project Server, but it actually wasn't, because we got a Microsoft rep on the phone, and we ran the default timesheet, and it was like 4 seconds to save somebody's time. It was amazing. We also were having a problem with the reporting. The reports ran once a day, but sometimes the reports didn't run or they just disappeared. Then we found out that the person who had done the reporting actually made copies of the reports every night at midnight on his desktop, and everybody in the company ran the reports from his desktop. So when he got laid off, all the reports stopped running. So we had to resolve that situation. Don't customize the timesheets if you can. And there is a reporting, or several reporting databases in Project Server that they're made for you to read off of. You can just read them. And so as the Microsoft guy told me, the custom timesheets are not supported, and there are native reporting tools in Project Server that you can use to pull your time reports, and it's perfect. That was several days of resolving that. So guys, that's my items, some of the things in SharePoint that I've done wrong. I'm open for any questions if you have any.
Man, I hate it when that happens.
Yeah.
Yeah, kind of the thing that you mentioned with Project Server and had like somebody got laid off, and then so stuff that was done under their account got locked out or lost out. That makes me think of workflows too, because SharePoint Designer workflows, whenever you have like impersonation steps in there and you publish the workflow is going to run as whoever published it, right? So have you guys seen this happen to where someone publishes a workflow but then you leave the company, or you're just a consultant and you leave? So that's one of the things, kind of best practice that you have to remember to do, is if you have a SharePoint Designer workflow with impersonation steps in it, and you need to go like get a server admin or somebody to log into SharePoint Designer and do that final publish before you hand it over, because if you leave or you get hit by a chicken truck or whatever, those workflows are running as you, and if you're gone, then they won't run, right?
I've seen the same thing a lot with reporting services data sources. People create reports and then have shared data sources or embedded data sources that run as their account, as a service account, just like you were saying. And so as soon as that account gets shut down, all the reports, of course, stop being able to authenticate to the database. Which is
are they putting their name like in the, like when they create a data source, they're going into the settings and putting their name as the authentication account to the data source? What they're doing?
Yep, to the database or whatever it is they're connecting to, but yeah.
Does that happen with like a SharePoint, if SharePoint is your data source, or does it?
Typically when you connect to a SharePoint list, which would be really the only time it's your data source, you're going to connect as the person using the report.
Okay, yeah, I thought.
But when you're connecting to a database, you're going to have that multi-hop, double hop scenario. So unless Kerberos is configured to that database, everybody can authenticate as them, then you're typically going to use a service account if you don't have that. Or, if you're not smart about it, you're going to use your account.
Toso/Jim Bob.
Right, which I always encourage people to not do. But anyway. Set up service accounts. They're good things.
Yes, service accounts.
And by service accounts, we mean actual service accounts, because I've seen a lot of farms where the administrator used their account to set up SharePoint. And so, like, the farm account is their personal admin account, like, because they were a domain admin or whatever. Then when they leave the company, somebody disables that account and everything stops.
Do you guys who are watching, there's 17 of you, I can see you out there, do you guys have any questions? Use the little Q&A app, or you can go on YouTube and make comments on the YouTube video. I'll go see if there are any comments on there. But I'll just kind of keep asking him questions and just until we see any other questions pop in. But as far as from what you see, Mike, as a server admin, whenever people first get SharePoint and you install it for them and you hand it over, because I remember when we first implemented SharePoint, I used to work at a healthcare company. It was just IT deciding that we might try out SharePoint, and then IT deciding, hey, I guess people might want to actually use this, and creating some sites for people, and it was all just IT making all these decisions, and there wasn't any kind of plan or governance. It was just kind of us. Well, I guess the HR might want a site, and I guess So, do people when they first buy SharePoint or implement SharePoint? Is it IT people like server admins trying to figure out then what to do with it, or how do they bridge that gap between having it installed and then people actually using it? Do they ever ask you about that? Are you ever involved in that?
No. Usually I'm not involved in those conversations, but it is normally just the IT guys saying we're going to use SharePoint, this is what we're going to use it for. I have seen over the years is what makes your SharePoint farm successful is the interface. If you can make SharePoint not look like SharePoint, branding it, that will draw people to SharePoint. I am not a design guy at all, but I know when I see a nice looking site or a nice design, that will make me go back to it. So I learned that from some bosses of mine years ago, but our customers who are successful with their SharePoint, they have a very good job of branding the site so it looks beautiful. That's what I suggest everybody do.
That's interesting. So do just end users and people out in the business, do they have something against SharePoint, or do they just like to see it look like a site they're using to look like their company with the logos? And I don't understand. Is it something inherently about SharePoint that they don't want to see?
I think it's a chicken and egg thing too. Like the companies that are more committed to SharePoint do branding. They have more buy-in all over, and so they do branding, whereas the companies that are just like, here's SharePoint, get to work.
That's true.
Because the default SharePoint templates, when you just build a team site, there's not much to it. Here are your documents, here are your links. It's kind of planned, and the ones I've seen that are very successful, they have some branding going on, and the sites just look well. Even though it's still SharePoint, the branding is what makes people come back.
Well, the branding's not the content, though. I guess they have to know what to put in it and how to get people to it as well, right?
Exactly. I used to think that the content was everything. Such as an admin, I would just say, well, here's your search bar. Just click search and find what you're looking for. And yeah, the content was, but many people aren't, farm admin. They really want that site to look nice. And as an admin, I'm like, I don't care if it looks nice. Just hit search and get your document. And I've learned over the years that it actually has to look nice. And that's how you get your business users to buy in, because it actually looks nice.
I would actually agree with all that. That's something, as the branding guy, that I have actually noticed over the years, is that companies tend to have more buy-in with a site that is branded. Whether it is like the chicken and egg thing, like Steven said, they have more buy-in initially, so they spend more money getting it set up and branding it, as opposed to just installing it and giving it to the masses. But it does seem, even before I became a SharePoint consultant, that when we were setting up sites for I used to work at a school district that deployed SharePoint, and basically every school in the district would have a SharePoint site as their school website. And the second that we applied branding to those sites, that was when everybody all of a sudden was like, oh, okay, I can use this. This actually looks like something that our school is that represents our school. And I think that kind of carries over into the business world as well. It's like, oh, hey, this actually looks like something that our company owns and that we're supposed to use, as opposed to, here's the thing, use it.
If I'm correct,
Yeah.
I think Ferrari.com is SharePoint. I know Hawaiian Air is SharePoint. And if you look at Ferrari.com, that's a beautiful site. You will go back, even though I can't afford one. I know Laura can, but I can't afford Ferrari. But Ferrari, Hawaiian Air, those are all SharePoint sites. And when you look at them, they're just they're beautiful.
Yeah, it is at top, and Ryan may know, I think it's like topsharepoint.com, TopShare, something like that, where you can see like all of the public sites that are SharePoint, which are pretty neat.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Yep, yeah. One thing you have to remember about a lot of those too is that sometimes people kind of go crazy and just customize SharePoint just because they can. They forget about everything that SharePoint can actually do out of the box.
They remove all of SharePoint from the site. And,
at that point, why did you even go to SharePoint?
Yeah, why not just get a regular hosted website?
I was talking to someone just the other day, and I told them that it seems to me the worst way to get in trouble with SharePoint is to try and ignore everything that SharePoint wants you to do a certain way. Like, here's how you upload a document, but we made this other way to upload documents.
Yeah. Yeah. Definitely, that seems to be a problem. But I totally agree with the branding, actually. Just from even the planning and design and adoption side of the house, you always see, you can really get them, especially if you're releasing a new intranet specifically, but you can really get them excited around, a branded, even if it's just the homepage, just something branded, because you could be like, oh, let's name the intranet, and let's have a competition around that, and then let's have a party to welcome the new intranet, you know what I mean? But even just the way it looks, that kind of goes hand in hand with that, rolling out and getting that excitement around something and getting the buy-in initially. You have to have the content and the taxonomy and information architecture to actually keep the buy-in, but at least for the initial getting them there, it really helps.
How do you spell that first word?
Information architecture?
No, before that, the other one. It sounds like taxes. What was it?
Oh, taxonomy.
Oh. That sounds hard.
What?
You get a lot of people asking you immediately they want to have an employee directory in SharePoint, and it's just use the people search. That's what it's there for. But we need to see a list of everybody. Is that the most common thing that people want to do and customize? That you just want to steer them toward what Microsoft kind of wants them to do?
I see that. I used to see that more, but I think people are slowly discovering what the people search is insanely cool in 2013. So I see that I have one client that I've been working with recently, and the way they use the people search, I'm just so proud. I'm super excited about it, because they actually fill out their project, their past projects and their skills, and then they use that in the search, so it's really cool to see that.
One of the things I've seen a corporate buy-in, one of my friends, Ham for Microsoft, he showed me the Microsoft internal My Sites with the profiles, and it is beautiful. It is wonderful. They have an employee of the week that pops up as you everything they do. Employees have gotten together and formed brass bands, and they search for nunchuck skills. It's actually really, really cool that they can go through their entire employee directory and find people who have their same common interests, and which just build a strong organization. And if I can get him to show it to me again next time, if we can look there and how it's set up.
That'd be nice. That'd be cool to be able to have automatically just have a web part that shows a random person from people search and have that be the person of the employee of the week or something, or of the day, or just automatically just highlight somebody on there. Yep. Of course, you'd have to make it so that only if they had certain fields filled out in their profile. That way you wouldn't have people with no skills or no, Yeah. that'd be a fun thing to figure out.
Or have it so that if some of those things are blank, that it puts an unhappy smiley face over their
public shaming them with their profile.
Exactly.
That's hilarious.
I have no skills.
Aww.
But it was funny. When I checked last time, again a couple months ago, there were 18 people who had nunchuck skills. They actually put nunchuck skills from Napoleon Dynamite. So it was actually pretty funny.
That's pretty cool. Yeah, it's so funny because I teach a SharePoint Power User class every month. It's a week-long online class, and whenever I get to the social portion and I ask people if they're using SharePoint Social, if they're interested in using SharePoint Social, what are they using it for? It's like crickets chirping. Nothing. Nobody. To me, from what I can tell from the people, nobody uses it at all.
Correct.
Nobody knows how to implement it necessarily, or kind of where to even start, or like employees don't care about filling out that stuff, or kind of frustrating.
I think a lot of it probably has to do with the fact that it's just one more social thing to fill out.
Yeah, and so that's the cool thing about 2013 is Microsoft kind of went out of their way to make sure and puts things like right in your face and easy to get to, like to go to your to follow a site or to like something, or they kind of made it
more familiar with other social things they may use.
Yeah, and it's actually useful, like the roll-up of all your tasks from SharePoint that in Exchange. That's huge.
Yep.
Yeah.
That is super huge.
Well, I'm going to go ahead and just make our announcements real quick since we're getting towards the end, and then we can talk about like future topics and stuff like that too. So as far as events, we've got SB TechCon's coming up in September. That's the SharePoint Technology Conference in Boston, September like 15th through 19th, something like that. I'll be speaking at that. And anybody know of any like SharePoint Saturdays near them? No.
SharePoint Bermuda at some point soon. Just thought I'd mention that.
He's like, boss, can you send me to Bermuda, please?
Yeah. Yeah, Laura, let's get on that. Come on.
So if anybody knows that Bermuda needs some presentations, Joelle has a lot of ideas.
Yep.
We also have we actually have a couple of job openings. So we have on this team we have a SharePoint engineer, which is like a planning and design guru that would be kind of like a planning design / architect, be able to meet with customers, sit down and do their whole like SharePoint planning and design session, which usually entails planning out server architecture, site architecture, governance, user adoption, like writing an entire document. A lot of this job has to do with like writing out documents like this for customers, and that is the deliverable that you would do. And so that's the engineer one, and I can get some links to that too. And then we have one that just opened up. They just published it yesterday, finally. Let me put that link in the chat window. It is, it's in this little showcase window. Oh, I don't have rights to be able to add that. I added the showcase app, and now I can't put links in it because then when I reopened the Hangout, it didn't put it in Chrome, and Chrome doesn't let you share links. I mean, IE doesn't let you share links, but Chrome does. So I'm going to share it with one of you guys on Skype and see if y'all can share it in the little tag thing if you're using Chrome. I already put on the little showcase. Showcase is the little app that's got the little yellow tags on it. I put the link to Mike Ross's Twitter account in there. And then this, so the second job is called a SharePoint developer, but it's like kind of that same stuff that we do, like especially me and Joelle do with all the out-of-the-box workflows, forms, just building custom business solutions, using a lot of content types, thinking through how you build a business solution in SharePoint and building those out for customers. And so that's what, again, it's called a SharePoint developer, and it even mentions some code and CSS and stuff at the bottom. It's really just an out-of-the-box dev. I need to get them to take the CSS and VCS and stuff like that out of there. But yeah. So that's the link that Joelle just shared in there, and then I'll go ahead and get the link to the engineer one. SharePoint. And both of these are actually work from home. And SharePoint engineer. For some reason, the developer one is listed in there twice. But okay. Here is Joelle. Here's the second one. I just put in Skype for you, so you could put that on the thing. And you guys let us know, does anybody have any questions or feedback about your funny SharePoint messages or anything like that that you want to share with us? We have everybody's shy today.
I feel like we should mention that if you got hired for one of those positions, you get to hang out with us on SharePoint Power Hour every single week.
Yeah.
Bonus.
Bonus.
And then as far as future topics, you guys who are watching Power Hour, we'd like to do topics that you're interested in. So please type some topics in the Q&A app or in the comment section on YouTube so that we can consider those. We also kind of have like a running list of topics that just stuff that we come up with off the top of our head that we might do for future. But no, everybody's like crickets chirping. Maybe there's a lag, so maybe the ones that are watching it live, I think there's actually a few second lag, so maybe that's why they haven't typed anything in there yet. We have some sort of regulars that come in here every week where we start like recognizing their names and seeing them in here. I'm gonna open up the YouTube page on my side too. Thanks so much for joining us.
All our regulars should say hi, at least in the Q&A.
Yeah,
if you're a regular, tell us that you're a regular and say hello.
Not that we're needy or super invested in this or anything.
Yes! Say hello! I need validation!
So thanks, Mike, for joining us. And I like to kind of pull in people that aren't necessarily on our immediate team to be able to like come share with us. So, Mike, we're going to drag some other guys from your hosted team as well. Kind of explain what team Mike's on. We have a team of people that take care of all of our hosted customers that are server admins that just work server tickets all day, just on SharePoint server issues and build servers and things like that, right, Mike? Mm-hmm. And hey, Andrew. Hey, Stacy. And so that's the hosted team engineers. And then on my team is business solutions, which we work with. We have other kind of contracts with services that we do for other customers that may not necessarily be hosted customers or they're potentially hosted customers. And so we do more. We're more consultants. So we're more. We have a wide range of all of our skills. All the stuff that doesn't entail server admin, really, except for Steven does server admin too.
But it's much different. Doing the server admin stuff for our services customers is way different than what the dedicated guys do, because the dedicated guys are dealing with, their hosted SharePoint stuff, so they've got much more consistent environments. And I think the way we were talking about it the other day in a meeting, and I get to see some of the mistakes that customers make when they're building SharePoint, whereas these guys get to deal with the mistakes that they make when they're using SharePoint more.
Or when SharePoint just breaks, or a patch goes wrong, or there's something going on with the server, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, you're right. Because you deal a lot with Stephen with people who have installed SharePoint themselves, and our engineers deal with every instance of SharePoint they're working with is pretty much they've installed, like Rackspace has installed SharePoint, and Rackspace has used like a certain standard script they always used and done a certain standard way. So yeah. Stacy says, one thing I've tried to figure out is an Evite site where people can say if they're coming to company functions and sign up for stuff to bring, etc. Actually, Stacy, I just built one of those for a customer just recently. It was an event sign-up site, and it's basically a SharePoint list of events and then a form library of the actual registration form. And when they click on an event, it's actually uses a query string to take them to a web part page that passes the information about the event to an info path form web part on the page, and then therefore they just click a register button, and it puts them in this list registered for the event. Yeah, that's just something that you could do with multiple lists and libraries and lookups. Who's got static? Y'all hear that? Okay, it's fine. And then spats,
Laura, that might be a good thing to do for one of the sessions, just to kind of quickly show what components are a part of doing that. I mean, obviously building it probably wouldn't be just an hour, but just even showing the components that are a part of that. That might be a good one.
Yeah. Yeah, Andy actually started building that, and I kind of finished it off. So that was kind of a collaborative thing. Let's see. Any other questions about topics. So besides that, so I'll put that in our list. Event sign up. Site. I've got other stuff in our little list like KPIs, cross-site publishing, information management policies, different. I like all the pages, like talking about wiki pages versus publishing pages versus web part pages. That seems to be really confusing. Do y'all find that to be something that people struggle with, especially when they're brand new to SharePoint?
Yeah.
Yep.
New.
Mike Ross, what do you think is the most common SharePoint issue that you deal with?
Usually it's the user that doesn't know exactly what they're doing. I had a couple of cases where they were moving their SharePoint to us, but didn't change their DNS, and then they were like, "Why is it all going back to the old site?" I'm like, "Well, have you changed your DNS yet?" And you may know like the internals of SharePoint, but they don't understand that you need good Active Directory and DNS to support your SharePoint, such as the My Sites. Yeah, your My Site's not going to work very well if your Active Directory is really, junked up with a lot of old information. So we do a lot with that stuff. Customers just don't know.
Do you find that people get really confused about permissions? Is that something? To me, it seems like that's one of the most common things that people struggle with when they're running SharePoint. Is that something you see as a server admin?
Yes,
Oh, you guys who are talking, go ahead and mute your microphones because the Google Hangout keeps bouncing around back and forth between everybody's faces.
So yes, I have a couple of customers who, for some reason, just cannot get their permissions correct, and we speak to them at least twice a week for the past year because they just don't understand that they'll add a person to Active Directory but not add them to SharePoint, or that the SharePoint put them in the wrong group in SharePoint. And I've had many phone calls walking people through setting up just regular old SharePoint, people in the right groups in SharePoint, right permissions.
It seems like Microsoft has tried to work really hard in 2013 to make it so it's easier with the little share button and everything. But the thing about that is what they did is they created a new permission level called edit, and now when you create a new site, it creates the members group and gives them edit, which is create lists and libraries, manage lists and libraries, and it gives them all this extra stuff that members used to just get contribute, which is just add and edit content. So it's one of those sort of gotchas. But they created the little share button everywhere for permissions, but if you don't have permission to edit permissions, you don't see it. But also, if you do have permission to edit permissions, you could easily just really go crazy with sharing a bunch of individual files and giving them all different permissions and things. So it seems like kind of the new prettiness could cause problems as well. I don't know.
I didn't know.
All right. Well, I'm going to go ahead and say that we'll figure out what our topic is for next week, unless you guys have something you want to shout out right now that you plan on doing. But what you can do, those of you who are watching, if you go to the YouTube channel and go to YouTube/SharePoint and it'll take you to let's see, videos. Let me go. I'm going to go do it myself while I'm doing it, and kind of put the links. SharePoint RAX. I'm trying to explain to you how you can get to the list of like upcoming events and see what the topics are. When you go to our SharePoint RAX page and you click videos in the little tabs across the middle of the page, then it's got a drop-down box and you can choose. It'll say uploads, but you can change it to say events. And then that will actually show a list of, it will say upcoming events. So it'll not only have all our power hours in there, but it'll have upcoming ones so you can go look at topics like next week and things like that. Alrighty. Okay, well, again, this is Laura Rogers. We're going to sign out and we will see you. Thanks again, Mike Ross, for joining us as our special guest, and we'll see you next week at 11 Central. Thanks.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
Bye, all.
Good luck.